Hi there, I'm Dean Heskin, President and CEO of Swiss America Trading, and you are tuned in to our podcast entitled The Secret War on Cash. Why is it entitled The Secret War on Cash? Well, in case you weren't already aware, there is each day a war that has been taking place on your and my cash for the entirety of our lifetime. And what does that war look like? Well, it looks like inflation. It looks like mismanagement through maybe perhaps our banking, mismanagement through companies in our financial markets. Really, the sad truth is there's no shortage of what this war is and what it represents. And I have with me today my co-host, Chris Agelastos, who will also be kind of weighing in on this topic of what this current war on our cash looks like. Chris, good morning to you. How are you?
I'm doing well, just trying to survive the heat.
Well, I don't feel too bad for you. I know you just got back from California, so you have survived and you have recharged your battery enough where I think you can make it through the summer. For those of you tuning in, we are based out of Phoenix, Arizona, and Phoenix, Arizona is a beautiful, wonderful place to live. There are 3 months of the year, however, that if you're going to come here, you may want to reconsider unless you enjoy 115-degree temperatures, and if you're real lucky, maybe even more than that. But enough about the weather, Chris. Let's talk about the secret war on cash.
Yeah.
So our first article here, I'm going to turn you loose on this right away.
Yeah.
Entitled 12 Countries That Are Actively Ditching the U.S. Dollar. Mm-hmm. Now, we know that there have been a lot of countries that have been talking about this and have been doing it, getting rid of U.S. dollars. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit more about this. There are countries that are ditching the dollar. Why are they ditching the dollar? What are they looking to achieve?
Yeah, well, the dollar's been losing ground, and this talks a little bit about some of the info the IMF has recently published regarding the dollar losing ground, largely due to BRICS nations, which I know we've talked about on here as well. But they're also bringing up this Association of Southeast Asian Nations, which their acronym is ASIAN. So that makes it a little easy to understand. But these countries are looking to strengthen their own currencies and their own economies. A lot of this has started because of sanctions that the U.S. And our, partner nations have put on Russia and China and so on. And so they're actively dumping the dollar. What that means is they are trying to distance themselves from the dollar. They, in times past, have used the U.S. dollar to back up their currencies. Their central banks use the U.S. dollar to support their currencies, and now they're looking to get away from that, using their own currencies and to do trade in their own dollars with partner nations. So really what it means is that the dollar is losing ground, losing strength, losing influence, which means our country is going to be losing financial influence, obviously political influence, because one of the ways we can sort of manipulate, I guess is the right word to use, other nations is through financial constraints. Similar to how I can manipulate my kids' spending by turning off the allowance if they don't do what they're supposed to do. And nations are wanting to free themselves from that burden. And ultimately, it's not good for our U.S. dollar, unfortunately.
Well, you flirted with getting into what will be our next article. But before we do get into that, one thing I did find somewhat interesting about this article, which is just basically highlighting who these 12 nations are.
Yeah.
But as we have seen here in the U.S. through most of our major news networks, et cetera, there hasn't been a tremendous amount of information coming forward or that they've been providing about BRICS, the alliance thereof, and the potential problems or downside that it presents to the U.S. dollar and to our currency and our economy. In fact, if anything, there's been a neglect, a denying the fact that it's even a problem or something that could potentially even create a problem.
Yeah.
What is interesting, the IMF in this case is who is highlighting this. So the International Monetary Fund, they're the ones who are saying, look, what BRICS is doing, they are ditching the U.S. dollar and getting into this whole de-dollarization. They are giving it, credence or credibility if you
Yeah.
will. And that's something that, I think is anybody tuning into this and anybody out there should really be taking a serious look at, is the fact that the IMF recognizes it for what we've been talking about it is, and that is a very viable threat to our markets and to our
Hmm.
currency and our economy.
Yeah.
Now, on to the next, the article entitled the "ThreeWays BRICS started the de-dollarization process."
Hmm.
And this kind of gets into what you were touching on there at the end of the first article. What are these 3 ways that BRICS started doing this? What's involved with this? What does this look like?
Yeah. Well, they started this. I mentioned because of sanctions. That's really what kind of, I think, gave them the final push. But their plan has actually been pretty simple. Let's reach out to nations that we trade with and allow them to trade in their local currency, which will help those nations because they don't have to go out and convert their currency to US dollars before doing these big trade deals. So they're rewriting a lot of these trade deals that have been in place for some of them even decades, and making it so that they can do business in their local currency. So that's the first step, which kind of makes sense, right? It's easy to implement. And they're going around now and convincing these nations as well, or just showing them, I guess, all of the benefits that can be had from strengthening their local economies and using their currencies, which also is going to give them positive political favor from their constituents, right? If the country, if I'm going to work and I'm doing well because the economy is running along nice and smooth, and my currency is retaining its purchasing power or even growing in purchasing power, I'm going to be happy and therefore, likely to, keep the current powers at be in office. And then the third major way that they're kind of manipulating, or not manipulating, but moving people away from the dollar is by creating a new payment system. And, people that have done international payments overseas, especially with Europe, are probably familiar with the SWIFT system. And it's just an easy way for someone here in the US to be able to send money overseas for business transactions or even personal transactions in other nations. And they have created their own BRICS payment system, and they call it BRICS Pay. Or at least that's the name they're currently operating under, where they can use their own currencies to transact and completely leave out the US dollar. And, a way too that it touched on actually in the previous article that they're able to do all of this is because the central banks have been replacing the US dollar with gold reserves. And I know we've talked about that a lot in other episodes as well. But what I found interesting is that the central bank holdings of central bank nations right now are almost equal to that of the reserves we had in World War II. So back when our dollar meant a lot more, and the world had a much more stable financial system, we didn't have the inflated debt issues that we have today. The central banks are getting built back up to those high bullion reserve levels. So they've got the confidence to be able to join BRICS because they aren't as reliant on the US dollar, and that's just giving them more momentum and motivation to continue this path of de-dollarization.
Yeah. Well, and if you look at BRICS and what it represents, if there's a concern I have with it, Chris, it's the fact that it's not a difficult pitch that BRICS has to make to these other countries.
Yeah.
They're two very simple, very pointed facts, and that is, like it says in this article, at the beginning or the onset of it, what really sparked this whole thing is when the U.S. put the sanctions on Russia. Now, some people might say, okay, well, Russia deserved that, and perhaps that's true. But what all of these BRICS nations or this BRICS alliance is needing to do when they go talk to other countries is say, hey, listen, do you want to see your local economy get stronger? And the answer to that has overwhelmingly been yes.
Mm-hmm.
And do you want to be victim of possible or potential future sanctions by the U.S.? And the overwhelming consensus there is no. And
Right.
two things that anybody would answer that, any country would answer that way, which is, I think, is what is creating or causing this tremendous increase or rise in the popularity of BRICS and this alliance that is looking to do what is really nothing other than the healthiest thing they could do for their country, their currency, and their economy. So,
Yeah.
well, I'm sure there will be more on this topic in the future. I say that every time because it's like unpeeling that onion. It's just another
Yeah.
layer after layer after layer. So we will continue to watch this. We'll continue to bring you any new information that we have on it. If you haven't contacted us to get a copy of your Secret War on Cash that talks about this and other issues, shares the title of what this podcast is, feel free to contact our office. You'll see the toll-free number there in your description, or you'll see the link that you can click on. Totally complimentary, totally free, no obligation. Definitely worth your while to get a little education and understanding on this topic. And I'm quite confident that once you do, you'll see that there is a even bigger need to have yourself financially diversified in times like this. So thanks for tuning in. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. Chris, thanks for all the information. And until next time, have a great rest of your day, great rest of your week.
Take care.